Friends, colleagues, listeners, here we are. First podcast of the new year with the infamous Stephen Dickson. Steve, lovely to have you on, my friend. And
very good morning, Chris. Very good morning to you. It's nice to be here. Happy New Year to you, Kathy, and all your family. Hope you had a lovely Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yeah, actually, we did, Steve. We did, and to you, Ramani, and everybody. I know you had a big family event there, but wasn't the way it normally is. But please God, things will get better as we move forward.
Indeed, indeed.
So, Stevie, right, I think what we do, we keep this one short and sweet, just a little introduction. We won't get too detailed, but I think one of the obvious things that I should be asking you is, what were the highlights of 2020? Or shall we say converting the lowlights into something positive? But, you know, for me, I had a second granddaughter in 2020, so it'll always be a special year. So there's always something positive that's happened.
Indeed. Well, I think we concluded this at the end of the year, Christian. Sort of what were the highlights? So, you know, what are the lowlights? What's the inverse of lowlights? I guess. Look, I mean, I you know, as we know, and all of our listeners know, you know, since we started this series in March, Chris,
yep,
they all know that I'm a regular traveller. I'm a million air miles man. And you know, I love a loyalty point or few, you know. So one thing that I missed, of course, was travel. One thing that benefited me from not traveling, albeit being stuck in the UK for a period of time without my family, was spending more time with my family, which I think a lot of us have got to do. Certainly now from where I am now, working at home in Malaysia, that has been something that I would never have experienced in a while. In fact, I think I've spent more time with my wife, my son, and my dog in the last 9 months than I probably have done since we got married. I think it's something similar for you and Kathy, is it not, Chris?
It is indeed, my friends. Yeah, it's the most time together since 1994.
Yeah.
I think she's just getting to know me.
The second thing I'd say is we lost 2 dogs this year, as you know, and you know that I'm very close to my dogs, as is one of our good friends of the podcast, David Ambridge, who lost a dog in the last couple of weeks as well, and thoughts go out to Dave. But I lost 2 dogs in the space of 2 weeks, my Dalmatian and Ramani's Maltese Terrier. But we did add a new addition to the family, which is our new Border Terrier, Zoe, and some of the viewers have seen Zoe, and so that really is a highlight. So when you're going through tough times and difficult times, whether it's in personal life, professional life, or any other challenges that might, dogs are a magnificent tool and a magnificent being to be around, and therefore that was certainly one of my greatest highlights of the year, although it's surrounded the bad times. So those are my two top personal notes.
Yeah, no, and I think you touched on something there, Steve. One of the highlights for me for last year was seeing so many nice people, you know, do nice things and caring about others within the industry and about others in particular, and the industry itself. And I was just interested to see the Qare, Qare, where they're distributing certain cargo free of charge. Qare.
I like that name, Chris. Is it C-A-I-R or C-A-R-E?
No. As with Qare, they've done it with the Q, so it's Q-A-R-E. So very
interesting. Okay.
Yep, very smart. But this Qare, Dare to Care, thank heavens, you know, so many more people are starting to get involved in it. You've got Etihad with the Hope program, and you know, so many good things are starting to come. And you know, everybody said about collaboration being an overused word and stuff, but the industry is starting to collaborate. So you know, things are I think things are looking good for the way the community will get together and address everything next year.
Absolutely.
But something I wanted to ask you about now, one of the gentlemen, and we had a wonderful podcast with him, Adam Twiddell. He's the Private Fly CEO. Now, a couple of things he said, and he was saying that 9 key trends for the coming 12 months that will have a major impact on private aviation, particularly, but it overlaps into the whole industry. But just to cover on those points, Steve, because most of them affect you. So the first point he had was, you know, about more remote working will change route patterns. And, you know, he's talking about, he actually mentions how more popular Nice has become to Paris, because obviously it's a nicer place to be if you're going to be stuck, and you don't want to be stuck in a big city. And if you can work from home, you can work from any home, whether it's a second home or whether it's, you know, somewhere else. So I think that's definitely going to stay. What do you think?
Well, look, here I am, a living, breathing example of it, Chris. I'm here in Malaysia. A lot of the work that we do, typically in Skylight Aviation, is in Asia. But I spend 1 week a month of every year, or 1 week every month every year, in Europe, whether it's in the UK or around and about the UK, around and about Europe, servicing our clients. And I haven't had to do that so much in the last 9 months. And actually, we found better ways to work together with Skylight Aviation's customers remotely in a way that we didn't think we could do before. So I certainly think there's a lot of advantage and mileage in having this conversation. I think there's a lot of benefit from production and productivity in this environment that we didn't think we could get before. I mean, very difficult to work remotely if you're a baggage handler, or you're working in a cargo terminal, or you're at the front line in a hospital, or you're sort of in the logistics side. But certainly in our roles, I think very, very doable. And one thing I would caution though, Chris, is losing contact and losing touch with the front line.
Yeah.
And as you know, you and I have spent time recently, smelling avgas, as well as smelling Jet A1 on the ramp or in the cargo terminal, supporting our clients, Chris. And that's always welcome, and it always just keeps things real. Seeing the lads in the terminal, the lads and the girls, I should say, these days in 2021, I suspect, to fit a more balanced audience. Not sure if that's our base or not, but let's accept that it may well be. But I do think that it is better to maintain that contact. So I do think there's some people said still about maintaining that contact. But absolutely, I think it will work. The problem I've got is that a lot of people that I speak to, Chris, also not necessarily in aviation, but outside of our business, whether it be in investment banking or in financial services or other industrial sectors, they really miss the cut and thrust of doing deals in person and sitting at the table doing business. And I was doing some work yesterday here in Malaysia, and we're doing some work on the medical supply side for aviation customers. And able to eyeball the people is so much better than a Zoom call or whatever. And having a pint with a guy and able to do a deal that way will always win me over far better than an email or a Zoom conversation. So I do think a lot of that will come back. So travel will be restored at some point in time.
I agree, and what I also think is, I think there might be a positive move whereby management will want to spend more time on the ground and actually have the sleeves rolled up and interface and see what's going on. And, I think it's long overdue, and I think too many people.
Wow. You and I we've spoken about this for years, but let's see it in evidence, Chris.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Too many people spend too much time talking about navigating from 20,000 feet and looking down in the bigger picture, and the people that know exactly what's going on are the people on the ground, and you need to be spending more time on the ground. So
exactly.
That's one. Now the other, the second point that Adam talks about is that business travel, and that it will return. His estimate is that it would be more in the last quarter, but it'll also be different. I agree with him. I think maybe third quarter, but it will be different. And I think one of the reasons, which he covers in one of his other points, is that people are going to be thinking about what they do more, and when they make their choices. So whether it's business travel on vacation, but in business class, people will want to go places, but they'll go for a longer periods of time, and it'll be that wonderful vacation, that dream vacation. So I think there's going to be less spontaneity. What do you think?
Well, I think there's a lot of pent up demand out there. I mean, the demand has been suppressed artificially over the last 9 to 12 months. People putting off holidays or business travel that they may ordinarily have done. Those that did go on leisure travel had to curtail their trips because rules and regulations were changing and up and down. And legislation was changing very quickly, which meant that quarantines came in, went out, testing came in, went out. Even with the test, they needed to quarantine. So I think that was a whole lot of challenges for the leisure travel industry. I do think what's very clear is people that I speak to, they all want to get out of the house or get out of the country as quickly as possible. The one thing I would say is, and I've seen it here, where we've traveled a lot in the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks domestically in Malaysia, and I still get criticism professionally and from professional colleagues and personal colleagues saying, well, why do you think you need to travel? Why do you think it's okay to travel?
Yeah.
Why are you traveling? You should be staying at home.
Yeah.
Actually, you've got no right, one, to be a policeman and tell me and my family what is right or what's wrong. Whilst it's possible in terms of the legislation, and whilst we should all take personal care and take personal responsibility, it is incumbent on every individual on this globe to take personal responsibility for their decisions. That does not mean that somebody can tell me it's right or wrong for me to travel with my family, whilst it's legally permissible in the country in which I live. The other thing is that actually, governments can only be so responsible, Chris. I mean, they don't issue you a handbook when you're born on this planet, and therefore people must take personal responsibility. If you expect the government to look after every single decision or action you take, go and live in North Korea or Venezuela. That will happen. You can be therefore reassured and satisfied that everything you do will be controlled by government. So what I would say is, if you're a much more outward-looking person in there, then I think that you will want to travel, you want to explore, and maybe a little bit more explorative, maybe spend a bit more on that holiday that you couldn't do before because you've been able to kind of put money aside. I accept a lot of people lost jobs or had wages cut and etc. And that is, of course, very sad. But nonetheless, those that now have got some disposable income to spend, I do think they'll be spending some more of it, and they'll be doing it more often than maybe they did before, because actually this was a very good 9 or 10 months to put into perspective what we have got, and therefore one should cherish what they have got rather than complain about others and what they may or may not have had.
Yeah. I hope there's going to be a more balanced logic with the way people express themselves and the way people measure themselves against others. It's far better to be happy with your lot. Yeah,
it's not exactly. Life's not a competition.
But it's something that causes a lot of problems, and people stoke it up. And you even look at what's going on in the press and on the television now. And I was talking to Kathy, and one of the things that stands out to us is every time you see a nurse or a doctor in intensive care, the messages they're giving make sense. But then when you get all these, reporters, and they're just desperate for a bit of negative rhetoric and trying to make emotions come out of people and almost forcing people to say things, I just think that's terrible. And I think what you're saying about the vacation, so many people now want to do something so nice with people they care about, or to see things that are different, that I actually think there'll be a sort of an opening for once in a lifetime, once in a year. And I think people will be doing that once in a lifetime vacation once a year. It might be more extreme, it might be more remote, it might be longer, but people, making memories, and that's at the end of the day, that's what life's all about.
Making memories happen and making memories matter, Chris.
Yep, make them happen and matter. Well done, mate. We're going to have to go into some t-shirt production.
We did that before, Chris.
We did, and I'm still waiting for one. Yeah, and Boris, back to Boris. Just very quickly, Steve, you're talking about how difficult it is for governments and senior management and everything.
Yeah.
All I think is one lesson is lay out what the expectations are and lay out what will happen if those expectations are not reached or if they are reached. Do it ahead of time, because so much of this short-term, short notice directives is what's really frustrating people, because they're not able to plan. I mean, to allow children to go back to school just for one bloody day, that's madness. That one day couldn't have made that much difference.
No, but Chris, I mean, here's where you. I mean, look, I'm no sympathizer. I do empathise and show empathy to the government, and not just the UK government, governments across the globe.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I get as exercised about the UK government as I do with the Australian government, or the Singaporean government, or the Malaysian government, or the US government, because I've been fortunate enough to live in these countries and therefore feel an attachment to them. And when you live and work some of these places, you kind of you become vested. I've also paid tax in a lot of these places as well, so of course that also encourages you to feel a little bit more that you've got a bit more opinion when it matters. But what's important, Chris, is I look, damned if they does, damned if they don't. That is across the board. What's clear for me is that as evidence changes, decisions change. So the press talk about governments making U-turns. Government haven't made U-turns. Government held a position the position was held static. Schools will remain open. Schools remain open even until a day before the change was communicated. Doesn't matter. The policy was schools should be open. There was no U-turn. It was a constant policy and conscious policy decision to maintain schools being open. When the evidence was presented and it became compelling, and it may be presented a week before or 2 weeks before, that does not matter one iota. What matters is the case is building. The consensus is building within a collective cabinet government to make the change. And that's what happened. And that's when the following day, just after saying schools should remain open, well, schools should now close. I don't think that's an issue, Chris. I think the issue is people making an issue of it when there is no issue to be made, like the media making an issue of the vaccination program and the role of the vaccinations. Just remember that the UK government has delivered a vaccination program, one that has delivered vaccinations to every single corner of the United Kingdom, not the national governments, but the United Kingdom. The second thing it's done is they've vaccinated more people than the entire rest of the European governments put together. So one should be careful about what they whinge about, what they moan about in the press. I do think there's something to be said about just batting on the hatches, sticking with it, flying the flag and saying, let's get on with it and let's stop this unnecessary whinging that only allows momentum to gather, and therefore these naysayers and these idiots that pretend this disease does not exist, or these anti-vaxxers to gather pace. That is very damaging, it's very foolish, it's very naive, and it will not help restore confidence in aviation and air travel.
Thank you very much. I feel like that person sitting at the dinner table who asked the wrong question at the right time. But accepted what you're saying. What I'm trying to say is, when you're in a position where you are going to get the blame no matter what you do, right or wrong, it's far better not to overcommit or to promise. And if you outline what the eventual potential could be if certain data-driven decisions get to a certain point. No, let me just my opinion now. Okay, I just feel then you don't have to go back on what other people perceive as promises. And I just feel that then it would be clear that schools are important. If certain influencing factors, A, B, C, D, are materialized, then this is what would happen. That's just my opinion. So I'm
not very good at poker, Chris. Can you tell?
Yeah, I can see that. But I just feel we should get on with the second course now. Otherwise we'll be going back and forth. We got different. But I understand what you're saying, and I've got you
can tell the people too much, and that gives them more information than they require, and that gives them the ability then to criticize unnecessarily. So look, I mean, it's really tough. What I'd like is what I'm thankful for to move this onto the main course is to say that the United Kingdom government finally, Chris, have obviously paid attention to the Chris and Stephen show since March, and now we have a test before arrival.
Yes. I knew you'd be happy with that. And I was watching the news bulletin this morning and the Heathrow. So I thought, yeah, Steve will be watching this or listening to this. And
because this is something that we, Skylight Aviation, my colleagues in 5Aero, my colleagues in the UK Future of Aviation group, chaired by Henry Smith, MP for Crawley. We've all been very active in remonstrating and protesting and providing policy advice, and far smarter people than me. But we've had access to professors and clinicians and medical professors and all these kind of people that I didn't know existed before. In the medical world, and they've also the same thing, which is test for departure from origin to the UK. And so I'm so very pleased, finally, that muttonhead, the guy with the cloth ears, Grant Shapps, has listened to us, and the Transport Secretary has enacted this policy from yesterday.
Very good, very good. So Grant, you know what to do. Just give Steve a ring a week in advance, mate. He'll tell you what to do.
I mean, IAG were on the case, Ryanair were on the case, EasyJet were on the case, BAR were on the case, AOA was on the case, ACI was on the case. It came from all quarters, Chris. It was just so frustrating that when you're providing pro bono advice to government, with really strong clinical evidence to suggest that testing for travel, to resume travel, had far greater benefit than a blunt instrument of quarantine, and they did not listen to you. They just sort of said, well, actually, why should I bother? But of course, we kept hammering that message home, and I'm really pleased that they've listened.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we had a great podcast with Nick Qare, SVP at IATA, and that's going out on Monday. And he's very, very outspoken. In fact, the two of you remind me of each other. You'd both be good company in the evening.
When can we do a tripartite podcast?
Yeah, maybe we'll fix one up. But he's a real...
I hope he's listened to my history of IATA comments.
No, yeah, but he's a straight up. He reminds me of a really good streetwise boxer. In fact,
although I have to say that Willie now being there will shake the tree, as I said before. So I'm really chuffed for that.
Yeah. No, Nick's looking forward to that session as well. I had a little joke saying that IATA's turning Irish now. So the old saying that there's only two types of people: those that are and those that wish they were. So that's going to be.
I'll sit you, Chris, down to the ground.
Policy to get into IATA. Yeah.
Top of the morning.
Yep. Now moving forward, sustainability, Steve. Okay, so lots of people talking about sustainability and what does sustainability mean to them. Obviously, the environment and and carbon footprint, etc. But for me, sustainability, and I've said this many times now as well, it's a balance between planet, people, and profit. And it's very difficult to be just focusing on one element when you don't realise all of the benefits and all of the repercussions of everything else. So even with airports, and with people saying that they'd happily convert their equipment over to electric, if you don't have the correct electric supply, it's not going to happen. And then when you look at the cost, and now you look at the battery issues, you look at the first and second generation of electric vehicles, there's an awful lot more complexity built around it than just saying this must happen. And alternatively, you shouldn't fly, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do the other. So Adam's point is now, the programs and the focus that they're putting now on sustainability and long-term sustainability in the private aviation is something that they should be shouting about, which he is. And private fly themselves, they're talking about 300% carbon offset as standard for every flight. So it's not about what they do, it's about how they promote it and how people understand it and appreciate it. And I think our whole aviation industry, we're not brilliant at promoting how good and how important we actually are.
Well, I would say first thing is aviation gets an unfair rap, in my view, in terms of its environmental credentials. I think on a per capita basis, in terms of travellers, one of the greenest industries on the planet in terms of transport. The second thing I would say is that that many airlines and aviation service companies are committed to green credentials. Long before anything, as kind of bureaucratic or lackadaisical or as wishy-washy as the Paris Agreement. Yeah. In fact, 13 of the One World member airlines had signed up to more extensive commitments than the Paris Agreement required for an aviation. 5 years before the Paris Agreement was enacted. Whilst you then got countries like Australia and China that really come under scrutiny for even believing that climate change exists, particularly Australia, a Western world, first world country who bury their head in the sand. I'm amazed that both governments, particularly the Liberal government, the current government of Australia today, that just buries their head away from this sort of stuff. You can excuse China to a degree because of their communist tendencies. Build it and we come and we'll sort of do as we wish. But even China have made a level of commitment more than countries like Australia. So whilst you've got countries like Australia, Chris, in the first world, the G20, that deny their climate responsibilities, I think it's very difficult for us in aviation to really kind of get the credibility that is rightly deserved. Yep. When the criticism is not being levelled at countries like Australia who did not take the responsibility seriously. I mean, the COP event this year being held in the UK, of course, is a massive event, and great kudos to the UK for chairing that in this year 2021. I mean, difficult event as I'm sure that will be to host, but But again, there's some great stuff been happening in the world. I think aviation will get greener. I think there's a lot of difficult conversations to be had around capital investment versus return on that investment, particularly in the likes of electric vehicles and so on. I think the aerospace is doing quite well in electrification, if I may say so. If that's a term. But there's much more to be done, particularly in the developing world. Where I am here in Southeast Asia, there's almost no electrical vehicles on the ramp or GSE or whatever. So I know that GHI and IATA and IGC are taking a keen view on and supporting that transformation. But the reality is, Chris, money talks, as we well know. Yeah. And whilst governments neglect their responsibilities, I think it's rather unfair to levy the same level of criticism at aviation, which as a whole is actually a very clean industry to begin with, before we look at all the commitments that the airlines and industry as a whole have made in terms of improving their green credentials. Exactly,
and that's the point, Steve. Right, listen, we're coming to the end of a very short and sharp and crisp opening to the year.
Let's hope it continues.
We're going to have lots of things to talk about. One last point that was in Adam's list was to do with merger and acquisition within the private aviation sector, which I think is going to be across all sectors, all industries in this particular year. So we've got the opportunity to cover that next week, and many other key points, and also what we think is the outlook for the year. But I also think maybe some point in Q2 we're going to have to bring those Boris t-shirts out.
There may well be some leadership challenge, Chris. I will reserve judgment on how that might well play out. One thing I would say is that Conservative leadership challenges are never pretty, and therefore the outcome may not be as you may well expect. So let's hold that thought until we're a little bit closer. I think. Look, in fairness, let's give the UK government and its cabinet the chance, including its leader, to deliver the vaccine. If that goes rather well,
exactly,
things will change. The British public are very fickle. They're not actually all that wedded. I was going to say something else, but I thought that would be rather rude. But they're not all that wedded to the political choices until it matters. When it matters, things may well change. So let's hope. Anyway, we don't have an election until 2025. So what? Or 2024. So what's to worry about?
What I was erring towards is that, I think there's going to be a lot of positive surprises this year. And
I would hope so.
Yeah,
given the UK's leading in the vaccine race, Chris, only beaten currently by Israel and Bahrain, a very small city-state that's not probably worth the paper it's written on. But I suspect the UK will do quite well. To have 25% of its over 80 population vaccinated already, just 2 or 3 weeks in, I think it's pretty good going.
Yeah, good luck to them. Good luck to everybody,
and good luck to everybody. Indeed,
exactly.
It'll be a long time before we see it in Malaysia. Sadly, I suspect.
Yeah, and please God, let's have a good 2021 for everybody. So
happy New Year to everyone, to all our listeners, and thanks for sticking with us. What started as a one-off in March has continued throughout the year, and here we are again, blessing your television screens and your YouTube apps and your airwaves on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever device you choose to use. Thanks for being with us. I think Chris and I are really chuffed you stayed the course.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. And like I said, always, and to the people that have written in, sent emails, asked certain questions, it's really nice to see how many great people out there are also helping others. It's brilliant.
Indeed.
All right, lovely boy. See you next week.
Thank you, Chris. See you next week.
Yep. Take care of yourself, and happy New Year to everybody.
Thanks.
Cheers.